For Pacifica Radio, I'm Christina Onnested. It's day 5 of a war between Israel and Hamas as the death toll has risen to more than 2,000 on both sides, some 1,000 Palestinians dead, 5,000 wounded, and in Israel, some 1,200 dead, 2,400 wounded. U.S. military aid has arrived in Israel as it's reportedly planning a land siege into Gaza. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights is urging de-escalation. Ravina Shamdasani is a spokesperson.
We are faced with an explosive powder keg situation, and we know how this plays out time and again. The loss of Israeli and Palestinian lives and incalculable suffering inflicted on both communities. All parties must respect international humanitarian law. They must immediately cease attacks targeting civilians and attacks expected to cause disproportionate death and injury of civilians or damage to civilian objects.
The UN says 18 of its buildings have been damaged in Gaza from Israeli airstrikes. Among the dead in Gaza are at least 260 children. James Elder is a spokesperson for UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund.
Killing and maiming of children is grave violation, and willful killing is a serious breach of international humanitarian law. We again, like all colleagues here, call on all parties not to target children and take all necessary actions to ensure their protection during these hostilities.
Despite the pleas for de-escalation, the situation is becoming increasingly dire. Gaza's power plant has run out of fuel and electricity has shut down. Hospitals are operating on generators that can last up to 4 days. Running water and heat are largely now inaccessible. Rami Al-Magari reports from a United Nations school serving as a shelter in Gaza.
Raed Abu Amna, a 47-year-old father of 4 children, has just decided to stay at the school after an adjacent residential building of 7 stories was hit by a warning drone's rocket.
The situation at the school is difficult, but I had no choice but to come here, seeking some place a bit safer.
The UN says that currently there are 72,000 displaced Palestinians staying at schools designated as safe shelters, as a majority of Gaza's population are now vulnerable to either injury or death due to intensive Israeli attacks. Gaza's hospitals are expected to be overwhelmed with mounting casualties. Ashraf Al-Qidra is a spokesperson for the Gaza-based health ministry.
We appeal to all concerned parties to promptly support the health system by providing all essential supplies, including medicines, and provide Gaza with special medical teams, as well as allowing injured people to go for treatment at hospitals out of the territory.
I am Rami Al-Magari in Gaza.
Meanwhile, in the U.S., President Joe Biden has said nothing about innocents killed in Gaza, but has reiterated his support for Israel. Christopher Martinez reports.
We will make sure the Jewish and democratic state of Israel can defend itself today, tomorrow, as we always have. It's as simple as that.
In a speech from the White House, President Biden called the Hamas attack an act of sheer evil, killing more than 1,000 civilians. He says that number includes at least 14 Americans. The State Department says another 20 Americans at least are among those taken hostage.
These atrocities have been sickening. We're with Israel. Let's make no mistake.
Prime Minister Netanyahu had already declared war. He issued a statement on Israel's response.
But though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken will visit Israel in the next few days to discuss aid. At this point, the proverbial fog of war is even stronger than usual, and President Biden says there may be another factor at play. He recalled a meeting as senator with then Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir days before the start of the 1973 Yom Kippur War.
This is what she said. We have no place else to go. We have no place else to go.
At this point, many people have no place else to go, and still the fighting continues. I'm Christopher Martinez.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has joined a meeting of more than 50 NATO defense leaders from around the world to make a personal pitch for military aid. It's the first time Zelensky's attending the NATO meeting in Brussels in person. His presence underscores growing concerns about cracks in what has been staunch international backing for Kiev in its war against Russia's invasion. Israel's war on Gaza has created competition for weapons and funding as allies are under pressure to send aid to bolster Israel. In the U.S., the Republican House majority is scheduled to convene behind closed doors to try to vote on a nominee for House Speaker. But lawmakers say today's private ballots to replace ousted Speaker Kevin McCarthy could take longer. Two leading contenders, Majority Leader Steve Scalise and Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan, appear to be splitting the vote. Republicans have created a stalemate that threatens to keep Congress partly shut down. The Supreme Court is taking up a lawsuit challenging a Republican gerrymandered congressional district in South Carolina that could shape the fight for partisan control of the House of Representatives. Arguments taking place at the High Court today will focus on a coastal district held by Republican Representative Nancy Mace. A lower court ordered the district redrawn after finding Republicans who control the state legislature improperly moved Democratic-leaning black voters into another district to make the seat safer for the Republican. I'm Christina Onnested reporting for Pacifica Radio.